dear viewers of the podcast Caught in the Motion. With me, the main host, Javor Ivanov, and with my favorite co-host, Kubrat Ivanov, more known as Scooby.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're joined by a very special guest who is John Burke and currently teaches in St. Mary's College, Rathmines. He's a super experienced teacher and has graduated with his undergraduate degree from UCD in 2002 in Greek and Roman civilization and philosophy, obtained his master's degrees from Trinity in 2003 in classics, and his teaching qualifications in 2008. Hello, John, how are you?
Good, thanks. Hello.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very happy that we have another classics themed episode with another expert in this field. And it's great. Now, you also, as a teacher, specialize even more in Greek history, and it's, my father's typically Rome, but now there's that sort of juxtaposition, but I like it. Now, we always started off, it's a typical question that we have with our guests is, what sparked your interest to pursue classics for a living?
For a living, I did it for my leaving cert. I liked it, and I suppose the kind of kid that was never particularly motivated by getting a career that paid me lots of money.
Yeah.
I was more interested in pursuing something that I was interested in.
Okay.
And I guess I was sort of just, I figured I'd always be alright for money. You just get a job, you work, it's fine, you pay the rent. But I did my degree and then I did my master's because I thought that if I didn't do a master's in it, if I didn't write that thesis, I'd regret it forever or just go mad thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then when that was kind of finished up with that, then it presented itself as an opportunity presented itself to maybe turn this into a living. And so I decided to pursue that, and I just kept pursuing it, and here I am.
One of the best in Ireland, I should say. John won't say it, he's very humble. But my next question is very trivial, and probably the answer will be short. But just to see the viewers how experienced you are, my question is, how many years you teaching classics?
Well, I qualified in 2008, so it's 2025 now. So what's that? That's 16 years. And if you really want to be pernickety, I suppose you could add in my HDIP year, 2007. And I actually started teaching classics the year before in another school where I got my innings in secondary school education. But that was like maybe just for a few classes, and then they kept me on as a substitute. So what's that? Maybe 17 years.
18 maybe years with these few classes you did. That's it's almost 2 decades. I mean, it's impressive. And
say it like that.
well, compared with my experience, it's much fewer. But in generally speaking, 2 decades, almost 2 decades, it's impressive. So the next question I have the honor as well to ask. There is always a question that bothers me. We talked about it before in more kind of
private conversation.
In a private atmosphere and matter. Yeah. Why do you think I always bother with this question? Why in Ireland you I like to answer me as what is really make Greece mythology and ancient history of Greece more interested to you, and why do you think most of the Irish people are more interested in the Greek history and mythology than Rome when it comes to classics? Because we know classics is Rome and Greece.
Well, okay. There's kind of two answers to that. So one is sort of the obvious historical reason, and then the other one is a bit more airy-fairy and intangible. So I'll start with the airy-fairy and intangible one. I think Irish people and Greek people are very alike. So we tend to get one another, I think, in a way. And and the more practical reason is just that Ireland was never conquered by the Romans. They never came here. So we're free to choose, and we choose the cooler ones.
Do you think in the context what you said that maybe the Greeks are like a free spirit like Irish people maybe as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, that's not to say that the Romans aren't free-spirited or indeed. No, I think it's just that in terms of, I don't know, it's a kind of, I find, and it's a stereotypical thing as well, so it's probably not fair, but my impression of the Greeks versus, say, the Italians, let's say, is that the Greeks are very relaxed and chilled out people.
100%, yeah.
And even though the weather doesn't correlate, there's a sort of an attitude to living that I think the Greeks are very good at. Like, so the example I might give is that, if you go down to sort of like the very warm parts of Greece and Italy, and maybe this will sound really small-minded, but it's my impression of it as a tourist. And I find that table service is usually not very good in the Mediterranean, and so let's say if you're in Italy, there's a slight hostility to it. I notice that they might not like tourists particularly, but of course you're paying, so they take their time. Maybe it's really not fair actually, and makes me come across as very small-minded. But I'll only focus on the Greeks, and that's not say anything nasty about Italy because they're actually lovely. But the Greek people I notice are just, they're really relaxed, and they're not going to rush because it's hot, and you can just wait a little bit.
Yeah.
That's actually coming across as really xenophobic.
No. But it's something that may be similar as well to Greeks, Magna Graecia as we know it, because they have not only, how you said, is the weather is more or less the same, like in south parts of Greece, and also they maybe, not maybe, they surely have a lot of genes coming from Greece.
Yeah, and also the Irish gods came from Greece as well, so there's that, I suppose.
But do you not think as well that a repulse, maybe, I don't know if it's the right word, but kind of put them off to know about Rome more, the Irish people, because they associate the Romans with the British Empire?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you go back to before, I suppose, to the 70s and 60s and beforehand, when Latin was a feature of Irish education, everyone used to know their Latin, and they would presumably know their Roman history as well. And I don't think interest in Rome is lacking in Ireland. And when I was in school, indeed, in first year, we had this sort of renegade little priest who taught us Latin on a Friday instead of French, and we used to love it. And then he got slapped on the wrist. Told not to do that anymore. So yeah, raffle. And so I don't think like Irish people are disinterested in Rome, or more focused on Greece particularly. But I think the Greece is maybe just more appealing to people who don't have maybe the background of being colonised by Rome.
Okay.
But I think if you talk to anyone that's interested, any Irish person is interested in history, or they're interested in the Romans, they love it. So
yeah.
It
depends maybe on the level of interest, the amount that they've read, the passion maybe towards it, because I feel like towards leaving a certain level, you're more so focused on maximalising your results than sometimes just enjoying the subject. Because I had a few subjects that I'd studied in school, and as much as I loved them, there was moments where I didn't want to read that textbook, or I did cover the notes, and maybe it's just naturally people might find the gods, the mythology, maybe just more interesting and easier to remember, or maybe have you noticed if you've had as a teacher maybe an exam on Greek mythology or maybe Roman gods, would there be a difference grade wise, or is it all?
Yeah, it's a hard one because the course that we teach is weighted in Greece. I think maybe the Greek civilization is easier to get a handle on if you're new to it.
Yeah.
Whereas at Rome, there's a lot of scaffolding that needs to happen. You need to learn a lot about the beginnings of it in order to understand. So if you're studying Caesar, for instance, there's a good bit of kind of background stuff that you need to understand. You know, what's an edile, for example, and how do you get elected to the Senate, and all those things. Whereas in Greek history, it's a lot. You can be dropped into the deep end and you can start swimming fairly easily.
Yeah.
Whereas with Rome, it's kind of an aggregate system.
Yeah.
Kind of build up. So as a result, I think teachers naturally choose the more Greek side of things because it's easier for a class to get it.
Yeah. Of course.
So maybe that's a contributing factor to this phenomenon.
Okay. And kind of following off popularity, what's being taught, I have a question. Why do you think that history is more taught in schools? Obviously, the dissertation, there's more history teachers, there's more people are choosing the subject. You can go to, public, private. History is always one of the core additional subjects that you can choose in comparison to classics, because you see the points in classics, even in Trinity, UCD, they're 450, 480, which is still high enough scoring points, and you'd imagine a certain percentage of them are going to teach. Why is there that disparity in popularity of teaching and the provision of teachers, and why is...
I just think it's sort of tradition and what people are used to. I think once Latin disappears from the school curriculum, classics was introduced as a subject in 1983, kind of because of the waning interest in Latin. So classical studies as a sort of studying Greek and Roman through English translation, which is what classics is a relatively new subject in the educational kind of sphere, whereas history has kind of arguably always been there.
Yeah.
So as a result, most parents know what history is.
Yeah.
Not very many know what classics is.
Yeah.
Because they probably didn't study it in school themselves.
Okay.
Or probably don't know anyone who studied it themselves.
Yeah.
So when they're, whatever it be, either 13 or 16-year-old child comes home and says, "Mummy, Daddy, I want to study about ancient Greek gods and animals and stuff." Well, they were probably already kind of worrying about, he's going to like history. What job are you going to get out of that? But then when you come along and say, "I want to study Greek gods," it's like, "Oh, Jesus." And so maybe there's more avenues into a career, or it's perceived to be more avenues into a career by studying history than classics.
And a follow-up question, do you think that now you've had maybe 1, 2, 3 possible generations that have studied the subject, do you think that the popularity, maybe in my generation when they have kids, do you think that there's going to be a higher demand, or people are going to start questioning why is classics not being provided more in certain schools?
I think so. It's a steady rise, and you're kind of expecting kind of generations to leave school and for their kids to come back. And for that sort of desire to be there. But certainly, students generally who study classics will like it, and past pupils of mine, and I'm sure any other classics students who meet them, and they always have, generally, because you always get 1 or 2 students that just don't like the subject, and that's fine. But most people who study it kind of value it and like it, and 2012 I did a survey of we needed data because we were trying to review the subject, get it reviewed for Leaving Cert. And lots of teachers did lots of things, but my little job was to survey Leaving Cert students, because we didn't have any fact-like data that we could point to, so it just looked like teachers complaining. So you needed to be able to point to some figures, some statistics, and so I collated a survey and interviewed kind of, maybe 40, I think it was 43% of all the candidates in 2012 to get this thing. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because there were certain questions on about what students value about the subject. And what they said at sort of age 17 and 18, was kind of the opinion of a school student.
Yeah.
But then you meet them as adults, and they're able to put a finer kind of more mature spin on that. You know?
Okay.
And I remember meeting one particular ex-student of mine. She's now a journalist, and she said that what she, looking back retrospectively, what she enjoyed and valued about classics the most was that she did more critical thinking in classics than she did in any other subject in school. And I think that's what students that are in the classics class, I think that's what they really like about the subject. And so if they have children down the line, it's natural to want your child to get the things that you valued as a kid yourself. You know?
Absolutely.
So yes, I think in the future there will be a groundswell of a desire for that, but who knows where we'll be in the future. You know, maybe we'll be taught by robots, but that's it.
Well, in the context of the question of my co-host, you mentioned earlier in our podcast that maybe as well the interest is not as big as in England because Ireland wasn't part of the Roman Empire. Then England was, and for example, as far as I remember, 3 emperors were proclaimed in Britain, so they're very proud of that. And also, not only the Romans, because we know very well that the Romans carrying this Greek culture with them. I remember years ago I read one author, unfortunately I forgot his name, but he put it very, very nicely. He said, Greeks conquer Rome by culture, and Rome conquer Greece by sword. So, I mean, when you study about the Romans, it's inevitable to study about the Greeks, because we all know the theater originated from there, and the most of the Roman gods, if not all. So, do you think it's because as well the Ireland wasn't part of the Roman Empire? Maybe it's not a compulsory subject in every single school, because we know in Ireland that it's only private schools and some public school has classics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that thing about like the Roman Empire, because you know, remember we were the island of saints and scholars as well, and in the Middle Ages, all those monks were writing all their manuscripts, and so Ireland was very definitely a part of the Holy Roman Empire, so you know,
In that sense,
in nominally, kind of in spirit, let's say, maybe rather than in taxes, but yeah. So I think maybe that's just an impression that we have as teachers, that students are more, they can fit easily into the Greek mold. But I don't, maybe it's not fair to say that Irish people are more interested in Greece than Rome. At least in a kind of a general sense. In school, perhaps, because of the way the curriculum goes, probably that's a fair assessment. But I think globally, sort of, it's probably not the case.
Yeah, and just going back onto the comparison between classics and history, because my father brought up, obviously, Britain is very proud, you know, of their Roman heritage, the emperors. Do you think that maybe the preference towards history is because there's still a personal link? I've had some classmates in the past where their great-grandfathers, they have a family tree that's linked towards the history that they're studying. So there's a certain degree of nationalism, even that nationalistic feeling of going in, and it's 50%, maybe it's United States or whatever, but 50% is Irish history that's being taught.
Yeah, I do. I think it's very obviously the case that's what it is, and also that there's I mean, I taught history for years, and one thing I noticed about, you know, you'd go to parent-teacher meetings, and dads, I used to teach girls, and so the dads would come in, and they'd be all like, oh, I love history, and I can't, in the World War II, it's Stukas and all this sort of stuff, you know, and I'd be thinking of the girl, the daughter that I taught, who didn't really care about that, but cared enough about it because dad likes it, so therefore she loves dad, so therefore she'll say that she likes it, but really like couldn't care less. And the dad was coming in, and so yes, they because there's a recent history is obviously something that generates interest, because you're right, you do have a connection with it. part of history that really motivates me is always ancient, and I kind of lose it once you get to kind of like the Renaissance, maybe the Industrial Revolution. Actually, maybe the Industrial Revolution. I would say. Once you get there, I start losing interest, and students of mine used to classic students at Leaving Cert, who I would have taught history to, because I always thought I did a good job of hiding the fact that I was bored in class, and then fifth years kids see everything, and they're very astute, and and frequently it would be thrown back at me. It was like, so it was obvious you hated history in third year, and I was like, no, I didn't. That's not true. So it was. No, you're right. That there is you're right. Maybe there's a level of disconnection. Although, in defence of that, what I would say is what I think what students very definitely like about classics versus history is that nobody's going to get offended. You can say anything you like about Alexander and Caesar, look into the evidence and back it up. No one's going to get offended by that. But there's a sort of a narrow kind of window of a right answer that you can say for Michael Collins, and if you go outside of that, you're going to fail the exam.
That's why it's a tough thing. Obviously, I didn't study classics, but I studied history. And sometimes I'd realise, I'm writing, about a certain president or a certain political leader, and I notice, wow, okay, if my teacher fails me here, it's okay because it's here. But if this happens in the exam, it's. And I took a lot of opinion-based subjects. So now, as the date for the Leaving Cert's coming up, the results, I'm thinking, did I go too far one end? Did I go? Trying to stay neutral it's a tough task. Certainly.
John said a lot of interesting things so far, but I agree with John that I hope the historians will forgive me. First-time historian before being classicist. My degree is in history and I continue teaching history. But I think classics, I agree totally with John, provides more there for critical thinking. Even when you look at it, Odyssey could be anti-war, could be not anti-war poetry. So, I mean, classics I think is somehow deeper.
Yes.
And provides more. Maybe I can compare it, I don't know if it's a good comparison, but it's the diving. When in history you can dive in, say you go diving in some not shallow waters, and there is more or less clear everything, but classics is like going to the Red Sea, diving in the Red Sea. It's more prospective, it's more colorful, maybe in a way. I'm I ask you for forgiveness all the historians. I'm a historian myself, I love history, but
I agree with you, but I don't want to offend historians, and I don't want to disrespect history because I like history,
So do I.
But there is a difference, I think, and maybe what I can give you an image. So if you think of second years coming into both a history class and a classics class, the atmosphere is just totally different. The second years come into a history class and they take out their textbook and they open it up on the page that they left off on, and they here's the questions and I did, and it's all of it. And there isn't really much of a debate between them. You don't really hear that. After they've got the chapter done, maybe if they're in third year or something, you hear them debating the pros and cons of De Valera or Collins or something like that, because they're interested in it. It's nice to hear. I think when second years come into classics from first year, they're a bit shocked because it's the atmosphere is very subdued. And they open up the Iliad now and take out a pencil, not my iPad, no, a pencil. And if your book isn't defaced with notes by the end of it, then you haven't done it right. And what we're going to do is we're going to really read these 2 or 3 pages very closely, and the conversation will go wherever it needs to go. At the end of it, you guys will understand this little component of epic or whatever we're happy to be studying. But I use the Iliad as a good source because the kids, they're only 14, but they're very aware that they're studying primary source. And they're not being told what to necessarily think about it. They're just being told, well, this is what it means, and this is, this is the context and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But it's kind of they like the fact that it's their opinion that counts.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in sadly in history, because you're dealing with a secondary source,
Yeah.
a textbook, and a compendium of these excerpts of
Yeah.
you know, as needs to be, because you can't really study a whole plethora of primary sources in
Yes.
history. But as a result, it tends to stifle the debate.
Yeah.
And the kids are just quiet.
Yeah.
And they're like, give me the information. Whereas classics kids they come into class and they're a bit more animated and they, you know, they're
But-
you know.
Even I've noticed this in history. People learn off the textbook, so it's whatever they've read in that one textbook.
Yeah.
That's what they remember, and it will do the job in the exam, and they can agree with it, where they agree with it, disagree with it. Sometimes I've read some stuff in the textbook, and I'm just, I have to put it in the history essay. But I wouldn't never agree with some of the things, whether it's Irish history. Like I was reading certain parts of how they were depicting the treaty and the whole you know, some of the stances that they took, it wasn't neutral. It was quite one-sided. And yeah. So obviously, when you go into a history class and you're trying to get, it's really the people that have an opinion and are passionate and really want to declare it, state it in front of the class, and that's where the best debates happen. Because fortunately, in my class, we were 7-8 students, but you'd have 4 or 5 that just really wanted to just say, no, I disagree with you, and it gave that element. But I feel like, obviously through my father, I've seen the classics questions. They're slightly more open-minded, where you're not talking about a specific time period or a certain aspect. You have 2-3 factors that you debate through the books that you've read, the quotes that you've decided to put in, and I think that's great because it allows for more open interpretation. And I feel like the opinion marks are valued more rather than in history. I feel like if you go on too much towards one side, it actually backfires in your overall grade.
Yeah, maybe. I can't speak for history because I don't teach it at the leaving cert level and I haven't taught it for junior for a long time, so I wouldn't like to comment for history, but I can speak for classics, and yes, you're right. When you're studying particularly Alexander or something like that, then the kids get into it and they come into class talking about it, and they often disagree. And when they disagree, then that's great. I always like to think in leaving cert particularly, one of the things I say to the students is, I'm not standing up and I'm not lecturing. Mostly you're going to do the talking, and I'm just going to steer the conversation. And I love when that comes, because then they start arguing, and my teaching plan goes out the window. Lesson plan, because this is better. You know.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like, right, fight.
Unfortunately, it didn't took place. We were planning with John, his students versus mine, but maybe in the near future I hope will happen. And even in the context, I'm saying this in the context of John said, even if you're comparing in classics the cruelty, the achievements of Caesar and Alexander, to compare them, you can have a lot of opinions even for that. And you have to look at the sources, and it's really cool, very interesting.
Yeah.
And very vast.
I think it's also more abstract. It's so
More
so long
abstract,
ago.
yeah.
I think it's great. I feel there's a level of just imagination that you can put in as well, just picturing it, even mythology. I can see how it can appeal more to a 13, 14, 15-year-old, and how that passion can continue on when they're older, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because at junior cert level, I've seen some students where, you know, they've obviously had to take it for junior cert level, didn't have much choice, whatever. And some of those guys that I've just graduated say, I hated history. I'm so happy I didn't do it for leaving cert level. It was so boring. Yeah, it was so boring. I was reading a book, and I just thought, but, you know, you get more out of it the more you put in.
Yeah, I think it's a different skill set. Let's say it would be unfair, I think, to compare classical studies to history totally. Because it's not really totally history.
Yeah.
I always like to, when kids are asking me what's the difference between classics and history per se, that's the first thing. I say, well, you don't study drama in history. That's the first thing. But if you are going to ask what the difference between studying history and ancient history is, I think the best way of doing it, and you go to that extreme example, you talk of Hitler straight away, because everyone knows that. And I said, well, in history, you're not really interested in why Hitler hated the Jews, let's say.
Yeah.
It's just kind of accepted that he did, and the Holocaust happened, and modern Europe is as it is because of this. The classical historian is interested in why Alexander despised the Persians.
Yeah. Okay.
And Alexander, or why Caesar considered himself to be superior to the Gauls.
Yeah.
And that very definitely has a bearing on his actions later on in life.
Yeah.
And I think maybe kids like, they like going into the psychology. It's biography, you're going into the psychology behind the history that drives the history. And you have that added kind of benefit of knowing that the course ends when Caesar is assassinated, or once Alexander is dead, that's the end of the course.
Yeah.
So you really only have, in Alexander, you've got 13 years, and in Caesar, you've got what? His career, I suppose. But I mean, there's a cut-off point.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of the consequences are quite slim,
Yeah.
Caesar was assassinated and there was a civil war and you went up with an empire at the end kind of thing. Whereas in history it's more kind of, well, the war ended and then there was peace talks and then the map was divided up and then the EU formed and it just kind of goes like, and then this happened and this happened and
Well, now that we've touched upon the nuances of emperors and comparing, what is your favourite emperor and why?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I'm gonna give you my honest answer, and I hope it's not controversial. I don't have one. I'm never really very interested in geopolitics, and as I said, once you get to the Industrial Revolution and you go beyond, I lose interest in history in many ways because it becomes about geopolitics, and I'm not really that bothered.
Yeah.
There's a poem, I was thinking about this and I couldn't remember the poem, but I studied it for my leaving cert, I think, maybe my junior cert. I think it's by Thomas Hardy, and it's called In Times of the Breaking of Nations, and I can't remember all of the words, but there was one, sort of the concluding part of it was, it says, yonder a maid and his wife come wandering by, something like dynasties will fade into dust ere their story dies.
Yeah.
His point was like that human beings will continue regardless of who's in power. And I suppose when you ask me, like, well, who's your favourite emperor? I said, well, they're kind of all the same to me. And I found them all kind of, when I studied them back in college, I mean, the honest answer is I just don't know them very well. So maybe that's the other thing, that if I went back into it and I read Suetonius again, and I read Tacitus again, I might come up and I might be able to say, well, Caligula or something like that. But I nothing since I was in college and I had to do it for my degree. Nothing since then has made me want to read all of that stuff again. What I'm always interested in is just human beings and normal life, normal people.
That's an interesting response. We haven't had that before. When we've asked about personae from the past, they sometimes like a ruler for his politics, his characteristics, or sometimes as I said, Caligula just being frivolous, spending a lot of money. I
was thinking about it last night, and I was trying to think. Well, I know they're all Roman books, so I should give them an emperor that maybe they can chew on. But then I thought, well, if I did that, that would be fake.
And we more or less kind of answered this question, but before I ask you, there is one Greek writer, poet, which I unfortunately forgot his name, very famous one. He said, when you are going to have a journey, pray to be long and full of adventures.
Oh, Gaddafi.
Thank you. Gaddafi. So, do you think, the question is, what makes the classics so special? Because of the journey and adventure?
What makes classics special? To who?
Special to the people who study. For example, we have Odysseus, we have Aeneas. Then for the students, what for you and for the students you think it's make classics so special? We touch a lot on it, but what comes first to your mind? make
I
it so special?
think the answer is always going to be different, and to that extent, I remember at one point I used to train teachers how to teach classics in the new, and I was told that I had to set them, 2 assignments.
Yeah.
And I felt like such an imposter trying to teach other teachers how to teach classics, because they had degrees like me, and I just didn't feel qualified to do it. But somebody had to do it, so I did it. But then, so anyway, this is a very long-winded way of answering your question, but I had to give 2 assignments. So I gave one very easy one, I thought, for a student teacher to write, but then the second one had to be a bit challenging, and I figured that maybe if you don't ask that question at the beginning, and you're lucky enough or grace enough to fall into a very nice job in a school that values classes,
Yeah.
you go to work in a private school, for example, you probably won't answer that question ever.
Yeah.
And so this time I made it contingent, I forced them. So I said, why would a student choose classics? And then I put a caveat into it, and I said, and remember, it's teenagers that you're talking about, so anyone who comes back with an essay that tells me about the hallmarks of Western civilization will fail immediately, because 16-year-olds don't care about that. Haven't been alive long enough to care about that. That's the answer of a middle-aged man or a woman, And so they really had to go off and think about what their students, cared about and wanted and all of that. So I guess the answer to that question is it's 100 different things, depending on who you talk to. But if you're going to ask me, as you are, what makes classics different? I think for me, when I was in school, and I did it for my leaving cert, I think it was probably the only subject that I studied that made me leave class thinking about something I had never thought about before.
Okay.
And I found that thrilling. And it wasn't that didn't happen in history or English or whatever other subject there was. It's just that the thoughts were kind of like they were generally on the same theme. So if you leave English and you're studying poetry, you're thinking about the profound empathy or human emotions or something. But I found with classics it was like an encyclopedia of ideas that I would leave class one day thinking about phalanx warfare and why it went extinct.
Yeah.
And then the next day I'd leave and I'd be thinking about producing a play and how stagecraft went. And so it was kind of like every day it was a new, different thought that I was having, and it was just this panoply of possibilities. Whereas, in history I was leaving and I was just thinking something historical, or in English it was just English, or classics it was just like the universe. And I was a kid who liked that. There are kids probably who don't like that as well. There are people, it's possible not to like classics, and that's fine, but yeah, I think that's maybe the answer that I would give, that that's what inspires this.
And now narrowing it down, in university, did you have a specific topic, lecture, a certain thing that out of all those emotions you felt in secondary school, obviously you followed through with that passion in university, but there was just that one class, topic, subject that you just walked out and you just had that feeling that's just even better in comparison to the other lectures that you sat, studied and was examined on?
Yeah, if I have to choose between one, they were all good, but yeah, if I have to choose between one, I would go for Michael Lloyd's tragedy course. I loved tragedy, and we had this lecturer, Michael Lloyd.
Professor Lloyd is from UCD. You met him was the last.
He was phenomenal, and maybe because maybe the proof of the fact that I enjoyed it so much is that it was only in third year, my final year, that a friend of mine came into class and my friend said, "Here comes Superman." And it was only at that moment that I realised he looked like Clark Kent. And for 3 years I hadn't realised this, and I burst out laughing.
Sure, I think we
but it wasn't like. And I think they had made this joke lots of times, but I hadn't heard it because I was so focused. What I liked about it was that he first of all, he was a Greek, he was clearly someone who read Greek, and he had studied Aeschylus and Euripides and Sophocles in great detail, in minute detail, and that's what I liked about it. That's what I really liked about classics, that you could get us a text and pour over maybe just one word or one line, and that would occupy your day, trying to figure out the exact meaning of that, what philosophically actually mean. And I liked that. And so when Lloyd was giving his lectures, I was just, a bomb could go off and I wouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
I'd be so... and I liked him as well because I was one of those students who would become obsessed with a tiny little thing, but I was also shy at that age, and I would go up to his office and turn around and walk away and think, it's a stupid question, don't know, and then I'd turn around and say, but I have to ask him because I won't go to sleep, and eventually I had someone up the gumption to walk in, and I don't know why, because he's very nice.
Yeah, no, he's very nice. I know him, and Kubi introduced to him the last seminar we were there. Unfortunately for the students, he's retiring this year.
It's a shame. Well, I mean, good luck to him, I suppose.
It's a loss for the students.
But he was great, because I would walk in and I would ask him some bizarre little niggly question. And not only did he click on it and knew exactly kind of what I was talking about, but he was even able to suggest immediately reading material, and he would just look at me and he would kind of like that's Warren on a page. He'd reach over to the shelf and he'd take it down and say, I think it's on page 170. There, this kind of thing, and he was just like this computer, but then I would take that book and I'd go off to the library on his recommendation, and I would find my own answer to the question that I wanted, but I liked the fact that he was able to facilitate that. And he was just a man who loved theatre. You could see it in him. And most importantly, then when I left university and started teaching, I started to bring students to see plays.
Yeah. And
frequently he'd be at the play. And so you saw that, no, it's not just that he teaches this stuff.
He loves
it. And he's a patron of the arts, and you meet him.
Yeah.
And I brought a tour to UCD Classical Museum one day with a class of girls, and we just happened to be in the thing, and he happened to be walking past, and I stopped him, and he's quite an unassuming sort of person, he sort of does his own thing, and I stopped him and kind of, I maybe embarrassed him a little bit, and I sort of said that this is one of my favourite lecturers, and he made me sort of love classics, and maybe contributed to the reason why I'm teaching you today, kind of thing. Yeah. So all the girls were very nice, they go, this kind of thing. And I think he got really embarrassed. So.
Yes, he's very humble, man. Yeah, I know him. I mean, he wasn't my lecturer because, as you know, I choose more topics and subject on Rome, but he's a very pleasant man and definitely
he's a hero.
One of the most knowledgeable scholar you can meet. How I said, it's unfortunate for the students he's retiring this year, but we wish him all the best. My next question is, John, you're a man with not only experience in teaching, you're a man who has been in many excavation sites, many times in Greece especially.
Wow.
Twice, was it twice? I thought it's no longer. Anyway, what the question is, I think it's very interesting. What was the most interesting object or discovery you made?
I think maybe it was in Ireland, in Greystones. It was a Bronze Age site on a contract in 2000 and would have been about 2003. And it was the winter time, so February. It was a very hot February day. We were in t-shirts. And this place is called Charlesland, and I think it's probably all apartments now. But
Charlesland. I have a lot of friends who live there with us. Yeah, so very well.
It was Greenfields or Brownfields because it was district. And they called us into they called it it was rescue archaeology, and I was working a contract. It's the only job I was ever fired from. I can tell you that story there. But the interesting find was. Because I was a tall guy, tall guys generally got the big rocks to move. And after a while of being moved off, excavate that, and I'd excavate it, and then I'd find something, and then suddenly it was like, okay, John, there's a big rock over there, can you move? And then someone else could take over my yoke. And I got fed up with this, and so one day I just refused. I was excavating around this little pot. And I just point blank refused. I said, no, I'm not. I started this. And I said, okay, well, someone's going to come in and help you then or something. I think they were afraid of breaking it or something. And that's fine, you know. But I said, I'm not. This time, I'm not going to move the big rock.
Yeah.
Stay. And so anyway, we brushed it away, and it was an upturned urn. It was Bronze Age. We knew it was Bronze Age. It was a Bronze Age site. And it came to a moment where we had to lift it, and we put like little cocktails. We really didn't want to break it.
Yeah.
And so we lifted it up, and the minute we lifted it up, there was, I'm not joking, there was a clap of thunder over our heads, and we upturned it.
And Zeus was angry.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and we upturned it, and it turned out to be a cremation urn, and inside it was the fragment of cranium, part of the skull, and it was really thin, and that meant it was a baby's cranium. So that was a very cool thing to excavate.
Okay, thank you for sharing this experience. Very interesting. Well, make you think maybe Zeus exists. Or when you say thunder, no, when you say thunder, it crossed my mind on Zeus. So I don't know. Maybe it's
infidel.
And just out of curiosity, maybe I'm being a bit cheeky here. Was it your refusal to move the big rocks that eventually led to
to being fired?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I was, me and two other big lads, we were sent down, because it was rescue archaeology, so they had this kind of deal with the builders that they'd excavate within a certain period of time. And it's one of the reasons I left archaeology, because well, at least contract archaeology, because I realised it was mostly just about extorting money out of builders, you know. So anyway, there was obviously a deal that had been done between the archaeology company and the NRA who were there. There was a limit of our excavation, and the builders can't really come on to the excavation site for fear of the archaeology. Anyway, down on one side it was like this little hill, and you know, basically me and two other guys were told to hoof it out. That was the expression. Just go down there and hoof that out. It's for the builders and they need it gone. And we agreed that we would go, and we ran out of time. So me and the two boys went down, and we were looking at it. You know, as an archaeologist, you start getting an eye for weird looking things. And we started looking at it, and was like, I don't have to look at this looks like it's archaeology. And one guy was looking at the little, it was a Bronze Age village, and it was like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a full up fit, you know. And we started to. We were told to hoof it out, but we couldn't resist. So we dropped a section into it. Like, and straight away we started seeing flexible iron and charcoal and things like that. And we scratched our head and we said, this isn't a dump. This isn't a midden. This is probably a flood, and it's heritage. And the three of us looked at each other and said, I'm not doing this out. I'm not doing it. Just not doing it. So we sat down and played cards. But the director, what we didn't know was the director, who kind of didn't like us, I think, was over at the other end of the dig, talking to one of the builders or something like that. But she had the survey tripod thing. And it has this little telescope in it. And it's very hard to pinpoint anything in those little things. I know because I tried to catch it. Parachute guy from the thing. Anyway, we were caught in the crosshairs of the and one guy got a phone call from him and I was like, oh, it's the director, you know, and I heard it, like I just heard his voice over the thing, you're fucking fired! And so the three boys were walking up.
Did you finish the game of cards?
Well, we went to the pub. But you know, we were walking to our colleagues, and all our colleagues were non-approval. And from then on, I knew I was blacklisted in that particular point. But I mean, you've got to get fired from a job for being for the sake of honour.
I totally agree with you.
So, out of all the archaeologists that you've worked, maybe even certain people, who is the most prominent archaeologist or classic experts that you have worked with in the past that's notable, maybe, or that has left a personal impression towards yourself out of colleagues or
I can't really say, because I'm not really in university, like I'm a teacher.
Yes.
So all of the people who like that who you mentioned are probably good teachers.
Yeah.
And so, there's too many to name, and I wouldn't really like to name them because I haven't asked them if I could name them or anything like that. We have an association of classics teachers, and over the years I've collaborated on lots of projects with lots of classics teachers. So there's a good few of them who I won't name, but they know who they are.
Yes.
And then after that, it's just kind of but there are other teachers, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a very exciting answer, I suppose.
I think that the story itself showcases you definitely met some like-minded and interesting people. So I think
we touched on that. Well, I'd like to ask you, what make Greece and Greek as a history, ancient history, as a mythology, what make Greece so special for you? What has come to your mind? Somebody said, well, tell me 2 or 3 things that really strike you and you love about this.
It's probably better to go back to your Gaddafi poem and to think of that thing about, when you get to Ithaca and if you find Ithaca wanting, do not feel cheated because Ithaca gave you the marvellous journey. And I think when my memory of going to Greece is that you fight Bari in Italy and then you jump on a ferry and you're a student and you can't afford a cabin, so you sleep on deck and you get drunk and you sing songs and fall asleep under your towel, hopefully on the shady side of the thing so that you don't wake up sunburned. Anyway, you wake up and you see northern Greece passing you by on the ship. And you recognise that Greece is, when you look at Greece, it's quite an arid kind of place. It's unassuming and it's not very impressive to look at. It's beautiful, but it has a kind of it's an arid beauty. It's a sort of
Arid beauty.
An arid kind of beauty, a dry, kind of dusty, rocky kind of place. And yet when you get into it, the culture is so rich and you just get lost in it. Whereas I think anywhere else you can go to I've never been to the desert. Maybe I would find the desert equally as enchanting. But if you go to a country like Paris or something, Paris is beautiful. But it's a different place, and it's kind of obvious what the interest in. Greece, you kind of discover it.
Yeah.
And it surprises you over time. So maybe that's what. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and what is interesting as well in this answer of yours, that he just came back recently from Greece, the same group of islands from Zaltek, they call it Zakynthos.
Yeah, I did, but
you had the same feelings, not that you were more in Africa.
It was very different. I'm sure that if you go into mainland Greece, it's going to be totally different than to the islands. But it was definitely a different feeling being in the island. I was able to get on a speedboat, go around the different beaches, look at the sea. Also saw a few turtles as well. But yeah, it was different. I was there. It doesn't really feel like Greece. Because people usually think of Greece, maybe the Athens or Crete, or the white polished buildings with the paint. It shows that even in the islands, the Greeks were all very proud of their heritage. I'd go there, order a moussaka, which is typically Bulgarian dish, but there's that sort of discourse between the
Balkans,
nations. But you could see every single time you're there, they were so proud of their culture, their heritage, their history, and it was great. But the actual environment itself and the nature, I've never been to mainland Greece, but I just felt that it was different. And when I called my father, I was like, I know I'm in Greece, you can see it's good, but it's just different, especially before I went, he was telling me all about the islands and, and even we attended the seminar, it wasn't Professor T that was talking, it was a different...
Professor Highwood? Right?
Oh, Christina Haywood.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
seminar you invited, yeah.
Christina Haywood going to be starting in archaeology. I didn't know. I'm doing Catalonia, which is the next island of the kingdom.
And I have to say proudly, my friend John was mentioning this seminar. His students
Yes.
achieved
Yes.
great results. So
100.
just for the people who doesn't know that our guest is really special.
Yeah, I agree.
And also seminar with the best artists in Ireland, John was mentioned. So but we met. She led the seminar.
Yeah.
Founding where is Odysseus place. And,
Yes.
believe me or not, I learned the first time there that it wasn't more likely, it's maybe not Ithaca, probably we never going to know, but it's more guessed that it's maybe in Kefalonia, the next island.
Yeah.
Even 3 locations are pointed and guessed that it can be, but I think, would you think it would be very hard to...
Well, I remember, like, everyone did their J1 visa in college, and I wanted to go to Catalonia to dig with Christina and her project, and we worked 6 days a week, and on Sunday we had off, and we decided we'd take a trip over to Italy that day. So we went from Samos, which Homer called Sam, over to Italy, and we were on this little ferry, and we had the Odyssey. We were really the classic nerds, you know. There's this little tiny little island that's an islet that's in between 2 islands. And you know, there's that story that Telemachus, he stops off at a tiny little island, you know, before he comes, you're looking at it and going, oh my god, like a bunch of little fangirls. And Christina knew where there was the spring of Arethusa, so she had known, so she brought us up to where Eunice was supposed to have us put. And we get there, and we see this rock that can only be the Raven's Crag. You know, it's It's the Raven's Crag. So it's like you're a bunch of pirates walk through the thing. And we're like, the Raven's Crag? Who's that? And so we had this little thing, and we spoke to this archaeologist, or an American guy who was obsessed with finding Odysseus' palace, and he was excavating this very
So John, is that the guy who wrote a book about it as well?
I can't remember.
Because they were introduced
he was elder than that.
yeah.
And he had this site, and it was the reason he decided to excavate there was because Homer says that Odysseus' palace is in a place in Ithaca where you can see the 3 bays. There's really only one place in the island where you can see the 3 bays. So it's got to be somewhere around here. So he was pointing at rocks. And we were looking at the rocks and looking at each other, kind of going, so, you know.
We didn't want to offend them. But that seminar was interesting that they introduced. I think he was one of the guys that used many theories, many locations, especially she did a lot in the seminar. My last question for me is, I can ask you thousands of millions of questions. I love classics, as you know. But my last question is towards you is, why young people should study classics? You mentioned it earlier on, but once again, why should young people choose classics? Apart of critical thinking, which I totally agree with you, I think it gives you a lot there.
I guess I just probably the easiest thing I can say is that most people that study classics tend to like it. An awful lot of them love it. And maybe the benefit of it is that it gets you into that zone where almost like the mechanics of the written word become an obsession. You know, and you really find yourself poring over books, and many books, and many sources, and images, and so it's really, in a very creative way, it pulls in, actively encourages you to pull in lots of different sources, and get your arguments as right as you can possibly get. I suppose, first of all, kids like that level of ownership of what they're doing. And it follows you into later life then, because it means that, you know, the obvious example is journalism or law or something like that. But even if it's business or something and you have to prepare a board meeting or something like that, you know how to do it because you've been kind of almost always doing it in classics from almost the word go. And maybe that's something to do with your career or something. But why should I do it? Oh, I do it because it's cool. Do it if you love it, do it.
I totally agree with John again, because I think it gives you really a lot of skills to debate, to make your point, critical thinking, even for business to be prepared for that. So classics really is not only something that you learn, because it's obviously it's like a universe so interesting, so deep, so powerful, so can be looked from different angles, but as well give you life skills. You see the human interactions, the good and bad, the mix of this in people. The Odyssey, for example, he can be looked at as a cruel man, but also he can be looked at from different points as a family man, a great man who loves his wife, who loves his son. But you can make the opposite point and say, well, not really. He was a bit of maybe womanizer, maybe a little bit cheating. Some can say, well, he was forced with Calypso to cheat. Somebody can say, well, he wasn't. He was kind of
it was his choice.
led to be captured there 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. He journeyed back is 10 years. So, John is right. Classics help so much.
Would include just a little anecdote this year, and it's from the school where I teach. I'm not going to name this guy, I don't actually know his name, because I don't teach him. But there's actually possibly in 5th year, they tend to eat their lunch in my classroom. This guy doesn't do classics, but he's friends with guys who do.
Yeah.
And I think he's very interested in science. And he asked me this year, towards the end of the year, he came up to me and he asked me more or less the same question. He said, what would you recommend about classics to somebody, for college or something like that? And he prefaced it by saying something like, because for me it's all science, and I just kind of see it as a waste of time, because I want to go into engineering, so I don't want to waste my time, on something like classics. But I appreciate it's interesting, but that's not enough for me. So how would you respond to that? And I didn't really have a response for him per se, because I think you should always follow your gut and you should follow your interests. And if his gut was telling him to do mostly science and that stuff, then that's what he should do. But I did caution him and sort of say, beware of chasing things for monetary gain. Beware of kind of doing things just because there's a paycheck at the end of it. Make sure you're interested in it. Because otherwise it's very likely that reason will come back to haunt you, and you'll find yourself in a career that you hate, and then tied to a mortgage that you have to pay, and then doing a job that you hate and you can't get out of it, kind of thing. So I guess follow your gut, and some kids that will mean do classics, and other kids will mean do history, and other kids will do physics. And I guess in some ways it doesn't matter what one of them that you do, because you're kind of studying the same thing anyway. Education is a whole. It's, you can, for instance, like the person in a school, the person who I would always think that have the most in common with is the physics teacher. And you wouldn't think that when you're looking at classics and physics, they'd be totally worlds apart. Yeah, they're actually very, very similar. Philosophy just blends into it. So that's a very philosophical answer.
And just out of curiosity, what is your favourite mythological figure, and also which hero is it? Why? So
can I say something very controversial again?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I make my living with Greek and Roman stuff. But if you ask me what's my favourite myth or my favourite hero, I'm just going to go back to Irish mythology. It's always feeling cool, and it's always the Irish sort of the Tuatha Dan and all that. I find it's richer and more human, and I sort of get it more, click it more. And I had a politics lecture once. Philosophy of politics lecture at UCD, and he was making this point about Renaissance painting versus Flanders Renaissance paintings. You know, in Italy, it's very strong contrast between light and dark. So you have Caravaggio, and it's very dramatic. And then you get to Jan van Eyck up in Flanders, and it's much softer, and because it's that more of an attitude. So that does something to your brain. So the political thinkers that came out of the Renaissance in the Mediterranean tended to have this very extreme view of Machiavelli, for example. And when you get into northern climate latitudes, it becomes a bit more grey and a bit more gradual and soft. And I guess when I think of when I think of like Irish mythology versus Greek mythology, say, the gods and the gods are all powerful, they can smite you at any moment. And yet the Irish gods are these kind of tricksters who are sort of kind of human. They're different sort of breeds, so they don't mean to be malevolent, but they can be perceived as being that, or they can just be perceived as being very selfish, but they don't really understand this kind of thing. But I find that kind of notion of being kind of stolen away to fairyland or gushing or something, and not really understanding it, figuring out what it really means to be human. And then coming home and it's too late because 1,000 years has passed. I find that more enriching than, I mean, it's kind of the same as the Odyssey in a way, because you're discovering what it is to be human, but maybe it's because in Irish mythology it's not proper down, it's not nailed down. They never have Homer. So you just have the myth and you can do what you like with it. Whereas Homer is very kind of like, this is the Odyssey, and I love the Odyssey, but I also love those Celtic classics as well.
Of course.
So I'm good for controversial.
We like controversy.
I think it's
yes, it is indeed.
So that concludes our episode for today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Enriching this episode with your perspectives, your knowledge and experiences. You know, I even learned a few things about yourself that I found very interesting. So it was great, and I'm sure that everyone else that is watching also enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to see anything else, please comment down, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.